What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking about trap cards in this video, and specifically trap cards that are on the Forbidden Unlimited list in the TCG. So you guys know a couple of days ago, I talked about how I thought that the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was going to become a lot slower in 2018 than basically what we're used to. And in the second half of that video, towards the end, I started talking about how traps are probably going to make a resurgence because I feel like trap cards become exponentially better the slower the game gets. The more focus there is on like turn one and establishing a board and stopping your opponent from establishing that board, the less value trap cards actually have, because trap cards kind of need the game to extend for them to have like great interaction. Yu-Gi-Oh! Talked about this. They don't really do anything if they're in your hand going second. The longer the game goes, obviously the more valuable they are. In fact, look at Zodiac as an example. When Zodiac were kind of ruling the world and they were, the tier 0 deck, you saw cards like Dimensional Barrier and Solemn Strike see tremendous amount of play, and they were huge factors. You look at D-Barrier, that card was one that people said was a problem card. It arguably needed to be hit or limited under that format. You fast forward to like when Spiral were tier 0, nobody wants to play the fucking card anymore. Same thing goes with Solemn Strike. It's just like the game is too damn fast. The game is it's already been decided before I even get to set my, trap card. I might as well play an Ash Blossom or a Ghost Ogre. A trap card essentially I can activate going second from my hand to try and stop my opponent's plays. But I think that a lot of people are getting like some of these unhealthy floodgates confused with a proper way to actually slow the game down, because I had some people commenting in my video that to heck with it, Cap G, let's just go ahead, take all the floodgates, put them at 3. That will forcibly make the game slower. I'm talking about cards like Royal Oppression and Imperial Order and Vanity's Emptiness, and I could not disagree with that opinion even. Like, I couldn't disagree with it more. I understand the sentiment. I just think that that's the wrong way to go about it. And in this video, I want to talk about certain trap cards that I think should go to 3 and be moved on the ban list, and then some other cards that can just kind of like metaphorically burn in hell and just need to stay banned. So let's start with the big guns, the floodgates that some people might be alluding to when they're like, oh, just put all the floodgates at 3, Royal Oppression and Vanity's Emptiness. So maybe some of you guys haven't played with Vanity's Emptiness, or excuse me, Royal Oppression Legal. I mean, I guess there could be some people watching this video that have never even played with Emptiness Legal, but it's been a very long time since Royal Oppression has been in the game. But for the most part, just take my word on it, it kind of served the same purpose. It was, I mean, it gave you a little more room for error because you could obviously play your cards and you could do some of your stuff. But speaking as somebody who, topped the regional with Black Wings back in the day, who played multiple oppressions in their main deck, it was kind of the same thing. You kind of establish a board. In Black Wings, you really didn't have to establish that big of a board because that deck had Kalut, so you kind of had backup from your hand. But you could literally just sit on an 1800 Shura with a Kalut in your hand, maybe a search from Whirlwind, and if your opponent was playing something like Lightsworn and they didn't have a copy of Lila, they really weren't getting through your board. If your opponent was trying to special summon, just forget about it. It kind of served the same purpose as Vanity's Emptiness, and the reason that I would not want any chance in hell, like I don't want any part of these cards coming back, is they don't really make the game slower. In fact, they put more emphasis on turn 1 than we have in the game currently right now, because essentially you guys know how Spiral can kind of feel like it's unbeatable if it makes its turn 1 board and then it has something like a Maxi as a just in case, as its second layer of defense, in case you somehow get through my Spiral Sleeper and my Firewall Dragon, maybe my Trigate or my Utility Wire, you still got to get through this Maxi. So either I'm getting a billion cards or you're going to stop on a very suboptimal turn 1 board, and you're just going to lose anyways. Well, Vanity's Emptiness basically does the same thing. Same thing with Royal Oppression. It just fortifies their turn 1 board. It basically says, all right, well, I've got all of these monsters and I can do a lot of stuff with them, but then I've also had this Vanity's Emptiness to just be able to lock out your special summons too. So if you thought you were going to Kaiju me, if you thought you were going to luck sack me with the Winged Dragon of Ra, you might as well just forget about that. There's no way you're getting through all these layers of disruption and or negation. That kind of just feels like it makes the game game even more turn 1 based. Now, a Floodgate that I would actually want to see back, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a ton of dislikes on this, but it's always been one of my personal favorites, and I will admit there is some degeneracy in this card, is Skill Drain. The reason that I like Skill Drain and I don't like the special summon stoppers is because I'll acknowledge the way that Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of constructed and the way that they build archetypes in 2000, basically 2013 going forward is, monster effects are just as important as being able to special summon. Those are things that are just kind of built into every archetype. So you would expect you to be able to use those. Like, you kind of feel like they're a right in Yu-Gi-Oh. Using effects are my right. Special summoning is my right, because that's how Konami builds the game. The difference between Skill Drain and the difference between like Oppression and Vanity's Emptiness is Skill Drain really doesn't fortify a turn 1 board. Let's take example of like World Chalice backed by a Vanity's Emptiness. If you have your World Chalice and you pop off and you flip over a Vanity's, okay, well, if you try to Dark Hole me or evenly match me or something like that, or you try to MST one of my other back row to turn off the copy of Vanity's Emptiness, I can just use something like a Trigate Wizard or a Gamma to negate that. Cards that I probably have on my field. But if you have the same situation and you have a Skill Drain, what does Skill Drain actually do? Like, Skill Drain doesn't actually help your board. Skill Drain works pretty much the same. It's kind of the same as if you had a regular just 1800 beater, or if you had a 5 monster board. Skill Drain doesn't actually help your board in any significant way. Skill Drain actually does the exact opposite, in my opinion. And that's one of the reasons I love it. Skill Drain essentially devolves the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! To what I often call caveman Yu-Gi-Oh! Skill Drain takes 2018 Yu-Gi-Oh! And basically takes it back a decade and says, you know what, let's play like we're playing in GX. We're playing caveman Yu-Gi-Oh! Whoever has the biggest monster wins the game. All of the fancy tactics and all of the awesome new mechanics that have been added into the game, all the high-tech shit, essentially doesn't matter when we're just using monsters as beaters. So I feel like Skill Drain and a card like Macrocosmos, which I'll talk about really briefly, I feel like they don't really speed the game up. They kind of just slow the game down. Are they annoying? Hell yeah, but it's why I would want the card Skill Drain at 3, is because it kind of serves a different purpose than something like Vanity's Emptiness. It's not flip over and my big board is now uncrackable. Skill Drain is like flip over and make the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, stupid and dumbed down. Macrocosmos is another card that I would like to see at 3. Macrocosmos is just kind of annoying, but one of the reasons I would like to see it at 3 is, in a vacuum, it doesn't really do anything, and even unlike Skill Drain, which makes the card significantly worse, it doesn't even empower any archetypes. You can look at a card like Skill Drain, you flip it over and cleave for it, and every one of your monster becomes an insanely powerful beat stick. You look at a card like Macrocosmos, all it kind of does is work with a lot of gimmicky cards like Grand Maju. Now, some other cards that I think should absolutely be moved towards like unlimited, or at the very least semi-limited, and I think that they would be ways of getting more trap cards into the meta. Most of these cards are at like 3 in the OCG, and I'm really not sure why Konami hasn't moved them, whether they've just forgot about these cards or maybe they're just a little timid. 3 cards in particular that I want to talk about that I think almost everyone will agree with: Compulse, Evac Device, Bottomless Trap Hole, and Torrential Tribute. I think Compulse and Bottomless are like no-brainers. Not only are we going to be getting another Trap Hole card, I believe in Flames of Destruction, but I mean, Bottomless really, there are so many different ways of special summoning, and like with Link 1s and with things like Scapegoat and tokens now being more popular, Bottomless Trap Hole will just continually lose its value. Evac is kind of another card that's just been power creeped. I think the Pendulum mechanic and Arc V as a whole just really kind of killed the viability of this card. I don't think that there's ever a chance that this card is going to feel overpowered unless we get some archetype that works specifically in conjunction. Now to Torrential Tribute, right? This is a card that I feel very passionate about, and I actually remember the days where Torrential Tribute was like one of the most powerful traps in the game. I love Torrential Tribute, especially when it's at like multiple numbers, because I remember the last time Torrential Tribute was at 2, and that format was so awesome because it felt like you had to be cautious at all points in Yu-Gi-Oh! Anytime your opponent, or at all points in the duel, I should rephrase that. Anytime your opponent had multiple back row, or even just one back row, and you already had a monster on board, you had to kind of tiptoe around, and you always had to weigh, could that be a Torrential Tribute? It kind of felt like you were tiptoeing through a minefield, but it felt like you were doing it throughout the entire duel. I feel like these cards are very comparable to Mirror Force. Like at certain points, they were incredibly powerful. At maybe you could even argue at points they were broken, but like Power Creep is a a very real thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I look at something like TT and I compare it to Mirror Force, and I'm just like, they both have incredibly high ceilings. I just don't get why Konami is like, they're not really afraid of Mirror Force, a card that at one point was actually banned, but Torrential Tribute is still at 1. It doesn't really make any sense. And then the last card I want to talk about is Solemn Judgment. This is one I've spent a lot of time talking about. I feel like Solemn Judgment does actually, like, it is one of those cards, especially if it ever went in multiples, which is why I would not want it at 3. It could kind of fortify those turn 1 boards, because you wouldn't want to be facing down a Spiral or a World Chalice field like backed up with 2 Solemn Judgments. It'd basically be like you can't play again. But I feel like at 1 it is kind of skillful, because you always have to weigh the fact that this card can cost you a duel. If you use it too early and it costs you too many of your life points, it's very easy for almost every deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! To get 4,000 damage on board. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you guys think that some of these trap cards should be moved up on the ban list? I didn't talk about Imperial Order. I would probably just keep that card at 1, but I don't want this video going too long. Whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.